I stood in the hallway outside my parents' living room, listening to them talk about me. "She's 34 and still chasing fantasies," Mom was saying. "When is she going to grow up?" "The tech thing is a phase," Dad replied. "Remember when she thought she'd start a company in college? Lasted 3 months." Through the doorway, I could see my brother Daniel nodding along, his wife Sarah smirking beside him. "Dreaming about being a CEO again?" Mom called out when she spotted me. "Come sit down, Alexis. We're about to eat." I checked my watch. 2:47 p.m. In exactly 13 minutes, Bloomberg would break the news that would change everything my family thought they knew. I smiled and took my seat at the Easter table. The Chin family had a very specific definition of success and I had never fit it. My parents, William and Grace Chin, had built Chin Properties from a single strip mall in 1989 into a regional real estate empire spanning 3 states. Commercial developments, residential complexes, mixed-use properties. By the time I was born in 1990, the company was worth $45 million and growing. Daniel arrived first in 1986. The heir. The continuation of the Chin legacy. From birth, he was groomed for greatness. Private schools, business camps, summer internships at the company starting at age 14. I arrived 4 years later, unexpected and, according to family lore, inconveniently timed. Mom had just negotiated a major acquisition. My birth interrupted the closing. She never let me forget it. My first clear memory of being invisible happened when I was 8 years old. It was Bring Your Child to Work Day at Chin Properties, and Daniel had been going for 3 years already. I'd begged to attend, wanted to see the offices where my parents spent most of their time. "Real estate isn't for little girls," Dad had said, not unkindly but dismissively. "You'd be bored. Why don't you stay home with Grandma?" I stayed home. Daniel came back that evening talking about contracts and tenants and square footage, using words I didn't understand but desperately wanted to learn. "Dad let me sit in on a lease negotiation," he announced at dinner. "I'm going to close my first deal before I turn 18. Mom and Dad beamed. I asked if I could go next year. "We'll see," Mom said, which meant no. I never asked again. The second memory crystallized when I was 12. I discovered computers, not just games but programming. I taught myself BASIC from a library book, then moved on to HTML and JavaScript. By 12, I was building websites for neighbors and local businesses, charging $50 each. I made the mistake of showing Dad a website I'd built for Mr. Patterson's hardware store. I'd included an inventory system, a customer contact form, even a basic e-commerce setup. Advanced work for a 12-year-old in 2002. "That's nice, honey," Dad said, scrolling past the code I'd spent 40 hours perfecting. "But you know, Daniel just helped me analyze a property acquisition. Real estate is where the money is. This computer stuff is a fad." Daniel was 16. His analysis had consisted of reading a report someone else had prepared and summarizing the bullet points. My website made Mr. Patterson $3,400 in new sales that year. Dad never asked about it. The third defining memory happened during my senior year of high school. I'd applied to MIT. Their computer science program was exactly what I wanted, a path to building something real in technology. I'd also applied to Stanford, Berkeley, and 4 other top engineering schools. I got into all of them. MIT offered a full scholarship. When I told my parents, Mom's first response was, "But Daniel went to USC for business. Wouldn't it be nice if you went somewhere closer? You could help out at the company on weekends." "I don't want to work in real estate, Mom. I want to build technology." Dad set down his newspaper. "Technology is unstable, Alexis. Bubbles burst. But real estate, people always need buildings. The Chin legacy is in property development. That's what this family does. It's what you and Daniel do. I want to do something different." The conversation ended with Mom crying about how I was abandoning the family, and Dad suggesting I take a gap year to think about my priorities. I went to MIT anyway, paying my own way through scholarships and 3 part-time jobs because they refused to contribute to a foolish dream. Daniel's USC tuition had been paid in full. I graduated summa cum laude with dual degrees in computer science and electrical engineering. I'd co-founded a startup during my junior year, a cloud computing platform that we sold to a tech giant for $12 million 8 months after graduation. My cut was $3.2 million after taxes. I never told my family. By then I'd learned that sharing my achievements only invited dismissal. If $50 websites were nice honey, and MIT was abandoning the family, what would they say about $3.2 million? I didn't want to find out. Instead, I did what I'd always done. I built quietly. I invested. I networked with other founders, other technologists, other people who understood that computers weren't a fad and that the future belonged to those who could code it. By 30, I'd founded and sold 3 companies. By 32, I'd launched Apex Ventures, a technology holding company that acquired and scaled promising startups. By 34, this year, Apex Ventures controlled $2.3 billion in assets across 27 companies. And nobody in my family had any idea. To them, I was still the little girl who'd been inconveniently timed, still chasing fantasies about technology, still failing to live up to the Chin legacy of real estate development. They had no idea that I'd spent the last 18 months positioning myself to acquire that legacy entirely. Easter at the Chin family home was an annual exercise in endurance. The house itself was impressive. A 12,000 square foot estate in Atherton that Dad had built as a showcase of Chin Properties' capabilities. 7 bedrooms, a tennis court, a pool house, and more square footage than any family could reasonably use. It was designed to impress and it succeeded, but it had never felt like home. I'd arrived at 1 p.m., parking my rented Toyota Camry at the end of the circular driveway. My actual car, a Tesla Model S, was in my garage in San Francisco along with the rest of my real life. When visiting family, I maintained the illusion of modest success, just enough to avoid questions. Alexis. Mom greeted me at the door with her usual mix of affection and disappointment. You're late. Daniel and Sarah have been here for hours. Traffic from the city. She looked past me at the Camry. Still driving that old thing? Daniel just bought Sarah a new Range Rover. Maybe he could find you a deal on something nicer. I smiled and said nothing. Inside, the family had gathered in the living room. Dad occupied his usual armchair, Daniel and Sarah on the leather sofa, their 2 children, Tyler and Madison, running around the adjacent playroom under a nanny's supervision. The prodigal daughter returns, Daniel announced, raising his scotch glass. Still saving the world with your little tech projects? Something like that. Chin Properties just closed on a $78 million development in Orange County, Dad said, not looking up from his tablet. Largest single acquisition in company history. Daniel negotiated the whole thing. Daniel preened. Took 8 months, but we got them down from $92 million. That's a 15% savings. Very impressive, I said, taking a seat in the corner chair that had been designated as mine since childhood. What I didn't say, I'd reviewed Chin Properties' financials 3 months ago during due diligence. The $78 million acquisition was financed almost entirely with debt, $71 million borrowed against existing properties. The development itself was over-leveraged, situated in a market showing early signs of softening. Daniel's negotiation had actually cost the company $4 million in concessions he'd given up to close quickly. But they didn't know I'd seen the numbers. They didn't know I'd seen anything. Easter dinner proceeded through its familiar patterns. Mom served ham and asparagus from the caterer she used for every holiday. Dad held court about real estate market conditions. Daniel dropped mentions of his deals, his cars, his club memberships. Sarah discussed their upcoming trip to the Maldives. Nobody asked what I did. They already knew, tech stuff. Unimportant. A phase. Then came the comment. So Alexis, Mom said, topping off her wine glass, any news? You job? You boyfriend? Anything at all? Work's going well. Still at that startup? Dad asked. I told them I worked at a startup 5 years ago. It was technically true, I owned several startups. But they'd heard entry-level employee and never corrected their assumption. Still there. Dreaming about being a CEO again? Mom's tone was light, teasing, but the dismissal underneath was sharp as ever. Remember when you wanted to run your own company? So ambitious. Stick to small jobs, Dad added. Nothing wrong with being a worker bee. Not everyone's meant to be in charge. Daniel laughed. Can you imagine Alexis running a company? She'd spend all day coding and forget to make payroll. Sarah joined the laughter. Mom smiled indulgently. Dad returned to his tablet. I checked my watch. 2:58 p.m. 2 minutes. Mind if I turn on the TV? I asked. I want to catch the news. Sports is on, Daniel said. I'm recording the game. Just for a minute. There's supposed to be an interesting business story. Mom shrugged and handed me the remote. I switched to Bloomberg. The anchor was mid-sentence, standing by for the announcement. Once again, we're expecting a major merger announcement in the next few minutes from Apex Ventures, the technology holding company led by founder Alexis Chen. Sources indicate. My mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. The acquisition target is Chen Properties, a regional real estate firm. If confirmed, this would represent one of the largest tech-to-real estate acquisitions in. Dad's tablet clattered against the side table. We're going live now to the press conference. The screen switched to a podium. Behind it stood Margaret Torres, my chief communications officer, flanked by lawyers and bankers. Good afternoon, Margaret said. On behalf of Apex Ventures, I am pleased to announce the successful completion of our acquisition of Chen Properties. As of 3 p.m. Eastern Time today, Apex Ventures has acquired 89% of Chen Properties' outstanding shares through a combination of direct purchase and debt assumption. The total transaction value is $340 million. The room had gone absolutely silent. Apex Ventures founder and CEO, Alexis Chen, will lead the integration effort personally. Ms. Chen's strategic vision. Turn it off, Dad whispered. His face had gone gray. I set down the remote. I'd rather not. On the screen, Margaret Torres continued her prepared statement. Ms. Chen's strategic vision for Chen Properties includes significant investment in smart building technology, sustainable development practices, and digital property management systems. We anticipate creating approximately 400 new jobs over the next 3 years while modernizing the existing portfolio. The reporters began shouting questions. Ms. Torres, can you confirm that Alexis Chen is related to the Chen Properties founding family? Margaret smiled professionally. Alexis Chen is the daughter of William and Grace Chen, the company's founders. However, this acquisition was conducted entirely at arm's length, with independent valuation and standard regulatory approval. Ms. Chen recused herself from any negotiations involving family members. Is this a hostile takeover? This is a friendly acquisition, approved by a majority of shareholders. Chen Properties' debt load had reached levels that concerned institutional investors. Apex Ventures' involvement provides stability and a path to growth. My father made a strangled sound. Daniel had gone so pale I thought he might faint. The company's debt load, Daniel repeated. She's talking about the Orange County deal. The one you over-leveraged, I said quietly. $71 million in new debt on a property that's already showing vacancy rate increases. Your negotiation saved 15% on purchase price but committed the company to interest payments you can't sustain. Nobody responded. They were all staring at me like they'd never seen me before. Because they hadn't. Not really. Apex Ventures, Mom finally managed. That's a real company? $2.3 billion in assets. 27 portfolio companies. 12,000 employees across 3 continents. Kept my voice level. Fortune magazine called it the most successful tech holding company you've never heard of. I prefer to operate quietly. Dad found his voice. When? I sold my first company at 22. Used the proceeds to start investing. Built Apex Ventures from scratch over the past 12 years. I paused. You would have known if you'd ever asked what I actually do. But you said you worked at a startup. I said I worked at a startup. Technically true. I just didn't mention that I own 27 of them. On the television, the press conference was winding down. A reporter asked about the Chen family's involvement going forward. That will be determined during the integration process, Margaret replied. Ms. Chen has indicated that all personnel decisions will be made based on merit and company needs. Personnel décision. Meaning my father's role as CEO. My brother's position as VP of Acquisitions. All of it now dependent on my approval. This is insane, Sarah said, speaking for the first time since the broadcast began. You can't just buy a company. Daniel's family built that company. My family built it, I corrected. My parents, my grandparents contributed the initial capital. The family legacy includes me, Sarah, whether you've chosen to acknowledge that or not. But Daniel runs it. Daniel ran it into $127 million of debt while the market was softening. Daniel approved acquisitions without proper due diligence. Daniel has made decisions over the past 5 years that reduced company value by approximately 31%. I stood smoothing my dress. The institutional shareholders were thrilled to sell. They'd been looking for an exit since the Q3 financials revealed the depth of the problems. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Press conference complete. All networks carrying the story. Your 4 p.m. call with the board is confirmed. I checked the time. 3:17 p.m. I have a board meeting in 43 minutes, I said. The first official meeting of Chin Properties under new ownership. Dad, you're welcome to attend remotely if you'd like. As founder, you'll retain an honorary position. No operational authority, but a seat at the table for major strategic decisions. Dad's hands were shaking. Honorary position? I built this company. You built a regional real estate firm worth $45 million in 1990. Through 30 years of work, you grew it to approximately $200 million in real value, less than the debt load Daniel accumulated in 5 years. I kept my voice gentle but firm. I'm not taking anything away from your achievement, Dad. I'm preventing Daniel from destroying it. Daniel stood abruptly, knocking over his scotch glass. Brown liquid spread across the coffee table. This is revenge, he said. This is because we didn't take your little tech project seriously. You're punishing us. If I wanted to punish you, I would have let the banks foreclose. The Orange County property was financed with a balloon payment due in 18 months. The company's cash reserves couldn't cover it. Chin Properties was approximately 22 months from bankruptcy. I met his eyes. This isn't punishment, Daniel. This is a rescue. You just can't tell the difference. The front door opened before anyone could respond. I turned to see 2 people entering the foyer. Victoria Blackwood, my chief legal counsel, and James Morrison, the senior partner at Morrison Financial who'd structured the acquisition. Miss Chin, Victoria said, nodding to me. Apologies for the interruption. Mr. Morrison needed signatures on the final transfer documents, and given the timing. Of course. I gestured toward the dining room. Let's use the table. My family watched in stunned silence as Victoria and James spread documents across the Easter ham and asparagus. Legal paperwork now occupied space where dinner rolls had sat 20 minutes earlier. Who are these people? Mom demanded. Victoria Blackwood, General Counsel for Apex Ventures. Victoria introduced herself. I've been coordinating the Chin Properties acquisition for the past 11 months. James Morrison, Morrison Financial. We handled the debt restructuring and share purchases. He produced a tablet. Miss Chin, if you could confirm the final asset transfers? I reviewed the documents while my family stood frozen around the room. The numbers were exactly as projected. $340 million total transaction value, $127 million in assumed debt, $213 million in direct share purchases. Apex Ventures now controlled 89% of voting shares, with the remaining 11% held by minority shareholders who'd chosen not to sell. Everything looks correct, I said, signing where indicated. James turned to my father. Mr. Chin, as part of the transition, we'll need your signature on the CEO succession documents. The board has approved Ms. Alexis Chin as interim CEO pending permanent appointment. Dad's face had gone from gray to white to something approaching green. Spiffy. She's taking my position. The board voted unanimously, James said. Given the financial situation and the need for immediate operational changes, they felt new leadership was essential. Ms. Chen's track record with corporate turnarounds made her the obvious choice. But I'm the founder. You remain on the board as founder emeritus. An advisory role, as your daughter mentioned. The compensation package is generous. $400,000 annually, full benefits, office space maintained. James paused. Frankly, Mr. Chin, it's a better outcome than the bankruptcy proceedings that were 6 months away. Mom sank into the nearest chair. Bankruptcy? William, you said the company was doing well. It was doing well, Dad insisted. The Orange County project was going to. The Orange County project is $14 million underwater, Victoria interjected. Market analysis shows vacancy rates in that area increasing 23% over the next 2 years. The acquisition was ill-advised from the start, financed with debt instruments that would have triggered default clauses by next spring. That's Daniel's project, Mom said slowly, turning to look at her golden child son. You told us it was a triumph. Daniel had backed himself against the living room wall, as far from the dining table documents as possible. The numbers looked different when we signed. The numbers looked exactly as they do now, I said. You just didn't read them carefully. Or you read them and chose to proceed anyway because closing the deal was more important than closing a good deal. How would you know? Daniel's voice cracked. You've never worked in real estate. You don't understand. I understand due diligence, Daniel. I understand debt ratios and market analysis and risk assessment. I've acquired 27 companies over the past decade. I know what a good deal looks like. I paused. I also know what a desperate attempt to prove yourself looks like. You've been chasing Dad's approval your whole life and it made you sloppy. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria cleared her throat. Miss Chen, we should discuss the organizational changes. The board has questions about the VP of Acquisitions position. She meant Daniel's position. What about it? Daniel asked, voice high and thin. The position is under review, Victoria said. Given the performance concerns identified in our due diligence, the board has requested an independent evaluation of all executive roles. Pending that evaluation, certain responsibilities may be reassigned. You're firing me. Daniel's voice had gone flat. You're actually firing me from my own family's company. I'm not firing anyone, I said. I'm conducting a review. If your performance meets company standards, you'll retain your position. If it doesn't, I let the sentence hang. Sarah grabbed Daniel's arm. This is wrong. This is all wrong. She can't do this. She owns 89% of the company, James said mildly. She can do quite a lot. My phone buzzed again. Margaret, board members assembled. Video conference ready when you are. I need to take this meeting, I said. Victoria, please walk my parents through the transition documents. James, if you could address any financial questions they might have. I walked toward the home office, leaving my family surrounded by lawyers and bankers in the house where they'd dismissed me for 34 years. Immediate consequences. The board meeting lasted 47 minutes. Through the video conference, I watched Chin Properties directors, people my father had appointed, people who'd been loyal to him for decades, unanimously approve my appointment as interim CEO. They approved the debt restructuring. They approved the strategic pivot to technology-integrated real estate. They approved the performance review of all executive positions. They did this because they had no choice. I controlled 89% of voting shares, and their fiduciary duty was to the shareholders, not to the Chin family's pride. When I emerged from the office, I found my family arranged in the living room like statues. Victoria and James had laid out documents across every available surface. Dad sat in his armchair, staring at papers that explained exactly how his son had undermined everything he'd built. The Orange County project, he said without looking up. Daniel told me the analysis was solid. Daniel didn't commission independent analysis, Victoria replied. He used internal projections prepared by his own team. Projections that were, as we documented, overly optimistic. By 34%, James added. The actual market conditions were 34% worse than Daniel's team projected. Either they were incompetent or they were telling him what he wanted to hear. Daniel hadn't moved from his position against the wall. Sarah sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, probably Googling my name, discovering the Forbes profiles and business magazine interviews I'd done under careful control. You're Alexis Chin, Sarah said, looking up from her screen. The Alexis Chin. Fortune called you the invisible billionaire. I prefer to keep a low profile. It says here you're worth $1.2 billion. Sarah's voice had gone strange. You're a billionaire. And you've been, what? Pretending to be nobody at family dinners for years. I never pretended anything. I just didn't volunteer information that would have been dismissed anyway. Mom made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. We thought you were struggling. We thought you needed help. I know what you thought, Mom. You made it very clear. Escalating consequences. Over the following weeks, the consequences cascaded. The performance review concluded that Daniel's acquisition decisions had cost Chin Properties approximately $47 million in value over 5 years. The Orange County project was just the most recent and most egregious example. There were others, smaller deals that had been approved without proper vetting, each one adding debt and risk to the portfolio. Daniel's position was restructured. He remained with the company. I wasn't cruel enough to fire my own brother outright, but his responsibilities were reduced significantly. No more acquisitions authority. No more signing power. He reported to a new VP of operations who had 20 years of experience and zero tolerance for shortcuts. Dad's honorary CEO position came with an office and a title but no decision-making power. He attended board meetings, offered opinions that were politely noted, and watched as his company transformed into something he barely recognized. The technology integration I'd planned proceeded rapidly. Smart building systems, digital property management, sustainable design initiatives. Everything Chin Properties should have been doing for the past decade. The institutional investors who'd stayed on were thrilled. The company's valuation began climbing for the first time in years. But the family changes were harder to navigate. Final consequences. 3 months after the acquisition, I received a call from my father. The quarterly report came out, he said. His voice sounded older than I'd ever heard it. Profits up 23%. Vacancy rates down. The analysts are calling it a remarkable turnaround. We brought in good people and let them do their jobs. You brought in good people. Your vision. He paused. I've been reading about your other companies. The turnarounds you've done. You're good at this, Alexis. Better than I ever was. I didn't know how to respond. I've been thinking, he continued, about why I never saw it. Why I never paid attention to what you were doing. Another pause. I think I was scared. Scared of what? Scared that you'd outgrow us. Outgrow the company, the family, everything we'd built. Daniel was safe, he wanted what I wanted, followed the path I set. But you. He laughed, hollow and sad. You were always going somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't follow. So you pushed me away instead of trying to follow. I pushed you away because if I couldn't have you, I didn't want to admit I'd lost you. He exhaled. I'm sorry, Alexis. For all of it. The dismissals, the comparisons, the career day I wouldn't let you attend. I was wrong. I stood at my office window, looking out at San Francisco's skyline. The city where I'd built everything. The city my family had never visited, never cared to see. I appreciate you saying that, Dad. Does it make a difference? I thought about the question. 34 years of being invisible. 34 years of building alone. Could words undo any of that? It's a start, I said finally. But words don't rebuild relationships. Actions do. What kind of actions? Come to San Francisco. See my company. Meet my team. Let me show you what I've built. Really show you, not the abbreviated version I gave at Easter. And listen. Not to judge, not to compare, not to dismiss. Just listen. Silence on the line. I can do that, he said quietly. I'd like to do that. Then we'll schedule something. 6 months after the acquisition, I hosted the Chin Properties annual retreat at Apex Ventures headquarters in San Francisco. The building itself was a statement. A renovated warehouse in Soma that I'd transformed into a cutting-edge technology campus. Glass walls, open floor plans, collaboration spaces, and a rooftop garden that had been featured in 3 architecture magazines. Nothing like the traditional offices where I'd grown up hearing about real estate deals I'd never be part of. My father arrived first, alone. Mom had declined to attend. The shift in family dynamics was still too raw for her. Daniel came with Sarah, though their body language suggested they'd argued about it in the car. The rest of the executive team filtered in throughout the morning. The retreat included presentations on company performance, up 31% since the acquisition. New initiatives, the Smart Building pilot program had exceeded projections by 47%. And strategic planning, expansion into sustainable development, a sector growing 12% annually. But the moment that mattered most came during lunch. I'd arranged for a private meal in my office. Just me, Dad, and Daniel. No lawyers, no brokers, no witnesses. Family business. I want to show you something, I said, pulling up a file on my laptop. It was a business plan. 23 pages, detailed financial projections, market analysis, risk assessment. I'd written it when I was 12 years old. What is this? Daniel asked. My first business plan. A website development company targeting local businesses. I wrote it the summer after 7th grade. I scrolled through the pages. I wanted to show Dad and ask for a $500 loan to buy better equipment. Dad leaned forward, reading. I don't remember this. I never showed you. I was going to the day after I finished it. But that was the day you told me that computers were a fad and I should focus on real estate. I closed the laptop. I built the company anyway. Made $4,200 that summer. By the time I graduated high school, I'd saved $47,000 from various web development projects. Dad sat back, his expression unreadable. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, I continued. I'm telling you because I want you to understand. I didn't become successful despite your dismissal. I became successful because of it. Every time you pushed me away, I pushed harder. Every time you said I couldn't, I proved I could. So we made you who you are, Daniel said, and there was something in his voice I couldn't quite identify. Bitterness? Admiration? Both? No. I made me who I am. You just provided the motivation. The silence stretched between us. What happens now? Dad asked. With the company. With us. Chin Properties continues to grow. The turnaround is working. In 2 years, the company will be worth twice what it was when I acquired it. I paused. As for us, that depends on you. What do you mean? I didn't buy Chin Properties for revenge. I bought it because it was failing and I could fix it. Because 1,200 employees would have lost their jobs if I hadn't. Because the family legacy, our family legacy, deserved better than bankruptcy. Dad nodded slowly. But I'm not going to pretend the past didn't happen. I'm not going to act like 34 years of dismissal and comparison and invisibility don't matter. They matter. They shaped who I am for better and worse. So what do you want from us? Daniel asked. I want what I've always wanted. Respect. Not because I'm rich now, not because I own the company. I was the same person before you knew any of that. I want respect because I'm your daughter. Your sister. Because I've accomplished things and those things matter even if they're not in real estate. You have that, Dad said quickly. Of course you have that. I have it now. Because of the money. Because of the power. I shook my head. That's not the same thing, Dad. And you know it. Another silence. I'd like the chance to prove otherwise, Dad said finally. I know I can't undo the past. But I'd like to try. To know you. The real you, not the version I invented in my head. I looked at my father. Older now, diminished in ways that had nothing to do with age. He'd built an empire and watched his golden child almost destroy it. He'd ignored his other child and discovered she'd surpassed everyone's expectations. Hey, I said. Let's try. The retreat ended that evening with a reception on the rooftop garden. Employees mingled, executives networked, and somewhere in the crowd my father and brother stood looking out at the San Francisco skyline. I found them there as the sun set, painting the bay in shades of orange and gold. It's beautiful, Dad said. Your city. It's not my city. But it's where I built my life. Without us. Without you. I didn't soften the statement. But that doesn't mean the future has to be the same as the past. Daniel turned to me. The performance review. My new position. Is there any way back? Back to what you had? No. But forward to something better? Maybe. I met his eyes. You're not incompetent, Daniel. You're just not ready. You've spent your whole life being handed things without learning how to earn them. If you want to rebuild, you'll have to start at the bottom and work your way up. Like I did. That could take years. Yes. It could. He looked away toward the city lights beginning to flicker on. I couldn't read his expression. I'll think about it, he said finally. That's all I'm asking. I left them there on the rooftop, my father and my brother, contemplating a future they hadn't expected and couldn't control. Behind me the city hummed with possibility. The same city where I'd started with nothing. The same city where I'd built everything. Tomorrow I would continue the work. Chin Properties would grow. Apex Ventures would expand. The empire I'd built in silence would keep building. But tonight I allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. Not revenge. Not gloating. Just quiet recognition that the little girl who'd been told to stick to small jobs had become something her family had never imagined. And she'd done it entirely on her own terms.